welcome to this edition of the Island Stat Sports Show. I'm your host, Earl Basden. My co-host, Juggling Jay, is off this evening, but I'm joined by the Shadow Minister of Sport, Ben Smith, and we're talking about, as we talked to the minister last week, about the sports, the national sports policy that was released in the Senate 2 weeks ago today.
2 weeks ago today.
2 weeks ago today. So Ben, let me just ask you right off the bat. We had the Minister of Sport release this in the Senate. You had an opportunity to respond to it, but now given some other time to go through the document and just giving you the opportunity to have a say about the document. Initially, when it was presented in the Senate, as you sit in the Senate, what was your initial thoughts of this national sport policy?
So I guess the starting point for me was that as somebody that's been involved with sports for most of my life, it was exciting to have something, right? I mean, I believe most people that are involved with sports and sports is part of their everyday life want to know that sports is at least a topic of importance. So that was the initial piece for it. So as we were having the conversation in our opportunity to debate the policy, what I was trying to do was paint a picture of why I think sport's important. Because, you and I have had conversations about this for years now about making sport important because we know what the end result can be, what sports can provide for your population, what it definitely can do to change the life of a young person. What I wanted to make sure was that we were not having a situation that happens so often, is that we're creating a document that is going to sit on a shelf somewhere and now nothing changes. Anybody that sport is important to their life wants to know that this is the beginning of moving in a direction that is going to make sport important. And for that reason, I took the time to really express the different levels that I saw within the document that I thought could be looked at and what we should be looking at and what we should be focusing on, just based on my experience within sport.
Yeah. So initially, obviously, you have this document in your hand. You're in the Senate. You have a chance to briefly go through it. But now that you've had this opportunity to really, double down into it and understand what they're trying to accomplish as far as the policies put in place. Let's talk about the pluses, because we could always say on the other side, we're going to get to the other side of what things can be also added to it to make it even that much stronger. But let's talk about the pluses. So in this document, what are some of the things that you wholeheartedly agree with?
The first thing is just making sport a highlight, right? So if you read the document, it's trying to elevate sport, right? That's part of it, right? So it's how we communicate about sport, coordinating kind of what you're going to do at every level within sport, the opportunity to have a national calendar that allows everybody to have an understanding of what's going on the weekend and what people are going to be involved in, what you can go and watch. Those are great things if they actually get implemented. But we've been talking about a sports calendar for a really long time. The way that I can easily find out what the sports calendar is that I send a message to Earl Basden, because I know that he's going to try to go to 90% of those sports over the weekend. Yes, there are positive pieces to this, and I know that some thought has gone into these initial steps. The part that I think that everybody would have been interested in was this idea that we were going to try to find more money invested in sport. I think that would be the piece that would have come out immediately. But right away, from a sporting person, I'm looking at it and saying, so half a percentage of the total budget of the government is being spent on sport. and the goal over 5 years is to reach 1%. I'm going to say that doesn't tell me that it is going to become a priority. The same expensive issues that we have in the country for everything else is obviously impacting sports at the same time. One of the things that is talked about in the policy is trying to get more involvement from the private sector to sponsor sports. So the private sector is already sponsoring sports. So the issue is, what are we actually going to change, right? So it can't be the same. And this is why I said I don't want to see a policy that is just going to sit on a shelf. And I said that in my Senate speech, but I also talked about the fact that the minister and I have talked quite a bit about it, and we will be meeting shortly to discuss kind of how we implement what happens next. Some of the ideas, there's, the buzzword of long-term athlete development. That's something that people talk about a lot, but what does it actually mean? So you see it in the document, and then for me, I want to know, okay, well, what is it that you think we're going to achieve from it? Because I'm going to tell you, and we've had this conversation before, I believe that Bermuda does a really, really good job at the younger age groups, right? Mm-hmm. We are developing world-class athletes in the age group level to early teen level across the board. Multiple sports are doing that. We have really good infrastructure. We actually have quite a good level of facilities in the country when you think about it. For an island, for a country this small, right? I mean, we're talking about a small town, and we have, a 50-meter pool. We have 325-meter. This is a lot, right? We do have a track. It's not. We always want more, right? Bermuda always wants to be way above that level. But when you actually look at it for the size of the community, we actually do have quite a bit of facilities that are at a good level. But how do you make sure that the money that you're using is being utilized to the fullest? How do you make sure that, I'm going to tell you that there are coaches and officials and people involved with sports all across the island every week that are volunteering their time in order for us to produce our athletes. Well, step one is we need to move from the volunteer standard to the professional standard. We have to, and when I say that, we always talk about getting the professional certification, but where is the professional money going to come from, right? Because it's fine for us to continue to say that people are involved with the sport for the love of the sport, but the result that we're looking for is against competition that's professional. So that means we have to change that mindset. We have to move away from it's recreational only and then expect the result to be professional, right? So when you look at our athletes that have reached the pinnacle, there's a difference in what happens from that age group level to that next step. So that's taking these initial ideas from this policy and figuring out how do we implement it in a way that will drive that next group of athletes to reach their potential.
Sure. One of the things, and I'm piggybacking on what you said, because you talked about you and the minister will be meeting, and and the 1%. Over the last, I would say, let's say 10 years, because at one point in time you weren't a member of the OBA. Well, you probably a member, but you weren't involved with the OBA. And now the current government, sports seems to be second, third, fourth fiddle. How do you convince your colleague that sports is just important to the country? Because it ultimately comes down to the people that are in cabinet, the people that are in government, understanding how vital. You can't just say it's vital, but then you don't show it in your actions. If you understand what I'm saying. What happens a lot is a lot of people stand there and to a podium with a microphone and say, sports is valuable, sports is this, sports is that, sports is the other. But then when it comes down to one, budget, two, financing, or all of that, it just seems like it's put to the back burner because it's quote unquote just sports.
So I'll start this with this. Most of the time, politicians get involved with sport when the medal is won, and now you want to be associated with a winner,
Right.
That's how it is, and that has no ownership of a political party. That has just been the case. And in Bermuda, um, as you put, sport has never been the priority. Okay, so for me, what I'm trying to get across, and that's why I use the opportunity to have the conversation with the minister about what we needed to achieve. So I'll tell you what the starting point of that conversation was. Flora wins the gold medal. We then have an opportunity. The minister and I had to have a conversation after that gold medal was won, and he said, "Well, what do we do next? Like, what do you think we should be doing next?" And I said, "We have an opportunity that is probably a once in a generation opportunity. The gold medal gives us this chance to reset the way people think about sports in the country, because she's reached the pinnacle. So now she has shown what is possible. That is your chance to then get the budget to change. That is your chance to get the way people think about sports to change." And to your point about how you get the cabinet ministers and the rest of politics to understand, which then helps us to encourage the rest of the country, is you tie the pieces together. We have a problem in Bermuda with obesity. We have a problem in Bermuda with high rates of diabetes and heart disease. And okay, well, fitness is attached to sport. So step one, let's try to get the country to be healthy at the same time that it gives us an opportunity to identify more athletes. If we have young people, when I say young people, I mean 4 or 5-year-olds that are already on the scale to being obese, chances of them being athletes is now significantly less. Well, if we move towards a country that's trying to produce athletes, we are also going to create the environment that makes those young people healthier. We're now connected to education. Well, if we can turn an athlete into a student athlete, now you have an opportunity at the end of that high school career to go to a university and have somebody else pay for it. Well, that should be something that makes it a priority for us, because if educating our young people and getting them that opportunity to get off the island and be educated away from the island to get that degree that's going to come back to Bermuda and help the country, and have that paid for through sport. So now you've got education, you've got healthy living. Well, look at it this way. Right now we have a problem because health insurance is high. Well, health insurance is partially high because of that issue with an unhealthy population. Well, health insurance is one of the reasons that it costs a lot of money for people in their pocket, which is cost of living. So now the finance minister, right? Health minister, education, sport, I can connect all of those dots to tell you that now I'm going to finish with this point: national security. So a lot of our young people that are in trouble is because if they had an environment through sport with coaches that were trained to deal with some of the things that are happening in our young people's homes, where they need to have somebody that is giving them guidance and giving them a positive direction, we would be producing better adults. Well, you have to actually think that through and plan it. If that's what we're trying to get to, rather than just put it in a plan and say sports can do this, well, how are we going to make sports do that? Because if you have a plan that says we're going to put these pieces together to make sport, have us be healthier, have our kids be more educated, have them have a positive lifestyle instead of a negative lifestyle, and put in the pieces how you're going to get there, you'll get buy-in from the country, and the cabinet will be forced to follow.
Wow. I mean, I'm listening, and wholeheartedly, I have to agree, because been fighting this battle for quite some time to get sports better recognized in this country, and a lot of people just seem to think it is quote unquote recreational. It's a bunch of kids, or it's a bunch of people just out having fun. But then, like you said, here we have Flora winning the gold in first in 2018. 2018 in the Commonwealth Games. She won the Commonwealth gold.
Yep.
She turns around and wins the Olympic gold.
Yep.
And then turns around again and wins the Commonwealth gold again to defend that title.
With those world titles as well, right?
Right, with multiple world titles, not just in triathlon, but in Xterra and all sorts of things. So again, here's an opportunity, as you said, to press that reset button, but we have yet to do so because many, many people just look at sport as, oh, it's just sport. It's just recreation.
But I'll take that thought further. So when they look at it as just sports, just recreation, let's think of it this way. So a young person leaves school in the afternoon. They've had a tough day at school, gotten in trouble, whatever it is, and now they're standing up in front of a coach. Doesn't matter what the sport is, and they have that opportunity to do the sport, which we know if you're involved in sport, you're exerting energy, which especially for young men, that's an important part that happens as they're moving through those early teens or preteen ages. But you're also getting the opportunity to communicate. I always say coaches get an unfiltered conversation with young people every day when they're interacting with them, right? It's different from when you're in a classroom. And a lot of times you're going to spend more time with them, more alert time with them than their parents do, right? They see them in the morning, they go to school. Now you spend that extra time, and it could be in the morning, it couldn't be the evening, and then they only get to see them just before they go to bed. If we look at it as important, look at the opportunity that we have, the message that can be provided by coaches to our young people to produce the positive result that we're looking for is right there in front of us. And there are a lot of people in this island that have been doing that for years, right? And they're volunteering their time. Go to the beach on a Saturday and see hundreds of little kids running up and down those dunes with somebody like Cal Simons, right? These people have been doing this forever. I'm going to take another point. I said earlier about finding Earl Basden going from sport to sport. Okay. I've been watching you do that for years and years and years. Guess what? We should be highlighting that you're doing, because the service you're doing helps our young people. Most people don't realize that you're covering sports and covering athletes that are in universities all around Bermuda, that highlights them, makes them feel a certain way, that then helps them to produce better results. And most people don't even realize that you're the one that's doing it, going out of your way to find them in sometimes obscure places doing sports that nobody's even thought about. I had the conversation with the minister and I said to him, we need to be supporting that. This is a simple fix, right? I bring up you, I bring up Ross McCall, I bring up Colin Thompson was doing the program within he started with Royal Gazette, but he was doing that specific program.
Mm-hmm.
Each of these things, why are we highlighting Mike Sharp after he's passed? Right? We know what you're doing right now. But guess what? You still have to be able to eat. Right? Mm-hmm. Sports is one thing, but as I said before, you just can't do it for love. The amount of time and energy that it takes, you have to take it away from your family. You have to take it away from other things where you could be probably earning significantly more money not dealing with sport. Right. So don't take the love of the sport for granted. And that's what we tend to do. Let's look at it and figure out how can we help you to do what you're doing even more, because look what it can do for our young people, highlighting the sport, making more people involved. Everything that I just said earlier about how all those pieces are connected. Well, let's talk to Earl Basden about how we make that happen. How do we put those pieces together and say to you, okay, well, we want shows that show each of those things that we're talking about. To me, collaborating across the board and figuring out how we make that happen is the way for us to move forward and make sport the priority. Now, I brought this up when we were having the debate. Money is important, right? Mm-hmm. Like we always try to pretend that it's not, but it is.
Yes.
Within the document, when you look at the document, there are multiple pages that are about Flora, about what Flora did, the achievement, and let's try to recreate the path. The difficulty is you can't recreate the path because, as I said earlier, we have this really good way of developing young athletes. So Flora had a really good foundation because multiple sports, multiple people in Bermuda that were helping out, and she had that great foundation. There are several years outside of Bermuda that developed what turned into the world athlete.
Mhm.
My question is, how does the policy get us from where we are getting right now to that next level? Because I've had the great opportunity to be able to sit with athletes when we travel, right? So at the Commonwealth Games, at the Pan Am Games, at the Olympics, and the athletes are in that village area, or especially when you're in the dorms, and they're just talking. They're talking about their like experience that happens. And I remember talking to two sailors, you'll know who I'm talking about, brothers, who were traveling around Europe. And when they were traveling around Europe, they had their boat and the mast of the boat on top of the car, and they're driving around Europe, and they're going from race to race. Well, as I said in the Senate when I brought it up, they were world champions when they were juniors. They were the best. Fast forward to them traveling around, they didn't lose their ability. That's not what happened. But they're now competing against machines. They're competing against like a firm. The people they're competing against are showing up with trailers, with multiple boats, multiple masts, and multiple staff. That's what they're up against.
Mm.
And we look at it and go, well, they came sixth. Really? That six was technically a gold medal compared to what they were dealing with, right? Mm. So my question is, if Flora today, right? So let's say we have the same ability level, we have the same work ethic, we have the same desire to be the best at whatever the sport is, and they're a young girl going to Purvis Primary, and she reaches that same level that Flora did locally, which is Front Street Mile winner, being able to win the cycling races, traveling to the Caribbean and winning medals there, right? So same setup. Does that young girl make it to world champion without the finances that came from the family? Right? That's the question. So so now when we say this is what we're going to put in place, how much do we mean? Right? Because I'm going to tell you that when you travel, anybody that's trying to get on a plane from Bermuda to wherever, it could be $1,000 just for the plane ticket. Then you've got to get airline. Then you've got to get hotel. Then you've got to feed them. Then you've got to get whatever the equipment is for the sport, right? We went to CCCAN Championships this summer, and it was $3,500 per person. Well, just imagine if we were taking a team sport and that was the cost. Well, who's paying for it? Right? So when you say 0.5%, understand what 0.5% is. 0.5% means that when you look at the list of sports, and I do every year, and you see who's getting government grants, some of those sports are getting zero.
Right.
Some of them are getting $1,000. What does $1,000 do for multiple athletes? Nothing, right? And I'm not saying that the sports aren't grateful, but understand from where we are today to where we're talking about going, the leap is significant and the cost is significant, right? So some of those early pieces are what I said. Let's take care of the people that have already been in this game, doing the work, lifting the heavy load, right? The what I just referred to as the Earl Baisdens, the Colin Thompsons, the Ross McCow, what Mike Sharp was doing, right? To get the message out and then help them to increase the message.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll have more with the Shadow Minister of Sport, Ben Smith. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the new bulk store, Lindo's Next Level. Wake up in the morning with enough coffee to keep you running throughout the entire day. Your pet at home deserves the best. Stock up on dog food to keep your puppy happy. Need a quick, tasty lunch at home? Your chicken nuggets will be jumping right out of the freezer. What's a movie night without popcorn? You can never have too much. Lindo's Next Level. Why go anyplace else?
I'm also thankful and grateful because my greatest value of my life is my legacy.
But why I do it? I feel supposed to do it. I was put here to be here, to do what I'm doing right now. Once I see somebody moving, it's the greatest joy for me. There's a little person being born.
I am thankful that people have given me the trust, for me to empower them, from my players to my family to friends. And that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that people have allowed me and trusted me to be in their life.
And welcome back. Shadow Minister, there were 5 goals in this national sports policy, and it was increased participation, achieve sporting excellence regionally, improve access to sports facilities, increase the value of sport, and establish a framework for talent development. Let's break it down a little bit from your point of view. Increased participation. Now, we know we've had a big exodus of young people going overseas to boarding schools and colleges and all the like. How do you see, or how do you envision that increasing participation for sport?
Well, the first thing we have to do is get proper data, right? How do you quantify increase if you don't know who's participating? Right? I mean, that's one of the issues in Bermuda. We're a small community, but we don't do a great job with collecting data, right? So knowing who is involved in what sports, as an example, we've just had the last couple of years under COVID, there is a group of people that have been lost, and we have no way of knowing what that is, what that number looks like, who it was, and that usually what happens when we lose them, they're not going somewhere positive.
Right.
But hopefully they left one sport and moved to another sport, but we don't know that, right? So when you say increased participation, to me, I need to know what that looks like, right? How are we going to draw the line, say this is what the participation level is right now, and this is where we're going to go incrementally one year after the other. That to me has always been a problem with what is the line that we're looking for. So then we know it's achievable. We've set a proper goal that looks this way. Right now, if we said we want to increase by 5%, you have to know what the starting number is to know whether you achieved it. And I'm not sure that we have that answer at the moment. So to take your point about the amount of people that are leaving the island, I actually brought that up when I was having in the debate in the Senate. I'm going to call it preying on Bermuda, right? Because Bermuda is known as one of the most expensive places in the world, if not the most expensive place in the world. And because of it, people from the outside know that there is money in the island, and people are willing to pay high levels of money for whatever they're trying to get. So there are people that are coming to Bermuda and they're telling our young people or their parents that they can achieve this greatness by doing this. And in most cases, they're getting on a plane and going to England or wherever else with these kind of sparkles in their eyes that they're going to be the next, and then list it, whatever the name is, whatever the sport is. But what we're finding is a lot of these athletes are actually traveling to another place and competing against the same Bermudians that they would have been competing against in Bermuda, just in 2 different schools.
Right.
The difference is no one is saying what is the data that's telling us whether this is working. Okay, so for the $60,000 fee, and people are going in debt to do this,
Right.
how many of those athletes that are paying that amount of money are being produced on the other side. We highlight the ones that do achieve, but do we ever talk about the parents that, put themselves in the hole and their child is no better than when they left Bermuda? And the reason I say it is because, if you dig a little deeper than the success, you want to talk. Good coaching is not just the person that's at the top, right? Everyone wants to talk about the coach that produced the gold medalists, but it's the ones in the middle. It's the ones at the bottom of the program. How are they achieving? What do their grades look like? Are they getting university scholarships? Are they moving in that direction? Or are we just in a situation where the money is leaving the country because people think my child is going to be the next whatever?
Right.
And what you're noticing is there's more and more people coming to Bermuda to collect more athletes, right? And in some cases, the athlete that's being taken is sitting on a bench in Bermuda.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going, well, wait a minute. It's not like you scouted them and say the talent level is X, and now I'm going to move it to this. You're looking at it and saying, no, the $60,000 is the goal. And whatever I need to tell that parent to get the $60,000 is what I'm going to tell them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, who's warning our parents? Who's explaining to them that this is the situation? And a step further from that, why are we not trying to figure out how to produce that here? You're not going to be able to produce everybody,
right?
But I'm going to say the level that is being produced in that middle area, Bermuda can produce here. And it won't cost you $60,000 a year. Right. But if they're willing to give $60,000 a year, think what that does for the local economy, what that does for the local coaches, what that does for the local people that are involved in sport, right? If you're willing to pay that kind of money, then why don't we put that academy here and keep that money in the country rather than sending it overseas?
For a point, we've discussed that over and over and over. All right, so achieving sporting excellence regionally. When we talk about regional, I guess even in the sport that you are involved in, when you say regionally, at certain age groups, we compete regionally. It's when we get, what's that?
I was going to say, we most definitely do.
Yeah. It's when we get to that senior level, that gap that you're talking about. How do we stay consistent regionally when we come out of those age groups into the senior level? So how, if you had an opportunity to talk to the minister about that competing regionally, how do we achieve that? What's the plan to achieve that?
Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is we have to do a proper talent identification, right? We are a small town. It is not possible for us to produce every athlete in every sport to be world class. We'd like to think that, but it's just not. It's not possible.
No.
Okay, so you have to go with talent identification, and part of that, and the part that's interesting with that comment is that the big countries have been doing this for a really long time. Mm-hmm. So they are looking at it from scale and producing the resources to have the people that are showing the work ethic, the focus, and the talent, right? Because you gotta mix both of those things together in order for you to get to the achievement.
Right.
So one, you have to make sure that you're not just throwing the money everywhere. You have to be more focused. But then you have to have a plan of how you are going to take them from a regional competition to the next step. And each sport has a different time for that to happen.
Right.
Right. In some sports, gymnastics, for instance, it's really young, right? Yeah. So you have to be reaching that peak at a much earlier age. Mm-hmm. And then you'll look at, where Flora is competing at world-class level into her 30s. A lot of other sports, you've been out of the sport for 10 years at that point.
Right.
So it's knowing that, focusing on it, and then understanding what resources are going to be needed in order to take that next step. Mm-hmm. So what I will say is, we have an elite athlete program where we are able to give athletes money and my words, to survive. Mm-hmm. I don't think survival is the goal.
Right.
But that's what we're doing, right? It's enough money to survive. But how do you thrive when all you're doing is surviving? That's the piece to the puzzle that doesn't work, right? So yes, you have that athlete that is able to go to training, that is able to have, the basic level of kit,
Yeah.
that's able to have food, maybe be able to go and get some supplements, whatever that is that they need to be at that level. But do they have insurance? Right? Are they actually making money to be able to live properly? Because that's the piece that happens next, right? And then what happens is this period where you're trying to go from a really good athlete to a great athlete. That's the piece we're talking about, right? If you have to work, that's not going to happen.
No, takes away.
It takes it away. If you have to worry about whether you have the money for a massage, whether you have money for a sports psychologist, whether you are getting, having interviews with you helps that person to get their brand out, which then gets other people to pay attention to them, right? I mean, one of the things that helped Flora was when she did Xterra.
Yes.
Right? Because all of a sudden it elevated her, which then gave her the opportunity to get sponsorship, which then moved. See what I mean? Those are the pieces to the puzzle where most of our athletes don't get that opportunity. Right? So you've seen it recently. We have athletes that have hit an achievement, and now we're giving them, a bigger stipend. It's one off, right? A lot of times they're paying off bills that they've been accumulating.
Right.
I can give you a message like the one that happened with Roy Allen Birch, right? So Roy Allen's over there training and doing all of that training to achieve the end goal, which is to get into that next level of the Olympics.
Right.
But he's not going to the doctor. He's not getting physio. He's not getting massage therapy. He's training, he's taking pictures, doing videos in order to help the team so that he can help to pay for him being there, right? So that's our guys doing more, where everybody else is just kind of going home, doing whatever they want. And he blows both of his knees out, catastrophic injury. Well, in Bermuda, it's over, right? It's just we take it for granted that what he was doing was going to be an achievement for everybody that comes behind him. Right? Well, the U.S. figured it out, so that's why he ended up on television shows and doing talks and right. He's going to events with NFL players and he's giving speeches because they could see it.
Right.
That's the part that we have to start to figure out, that our athletes, our sports people, are important at that level. If we show that on an ongoing basis, the generation behind them sees it and says, well, I want to do that. Right now, I'm not sure that the end goal should be to do that, because I'm not sure that you're going to be taken care of at that level. Right. At this point, if you're an athlete that's good enough, right, and it happens, you get to that point, and now the UK might say, well, we'll take you. Well, what is it that they're going to give that you can't get here? That's the question that we have to answer. That's the question that when I'm having the
they dangle a carrot and make it look good.
Yes.
But as we've seen multiple athletes say they were kind of quote unquote hoodwinked.
Yep.
Once they arrived and they got there, they were doing what they were asked to do, but it was kind of just to add flavor to their organization as opposed to making that athlete better.
Yes. So what we have to figure out is, what was the carrot? And then we provide the carrot so we don't have to look over here.
Right. Well, let's take another commercial break. When we come back, we'll have more of the Shadow Minister of Sport, Ben Smith. We'll be right back.
I'm also thankful and grateful because my greatest value of my life is my legacy.
But why I do it? I feel supposed to do it. I was put here to be here, to do what I'm doing right now. Once I see somebody moving, it's the greatest joy for me. There's a little person being born.
I am thankful that people have given me the trust, for me to empower them, from my players to my family to friends. And that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that people have allowed me and trusted me to be in their life.
Putting down the weapons.
You seeing this?
Welcome to the new bulk store, Lindo's Next Level. Wake up in the morning with enough coffee to keep you running throughout the entire day. Your pet at home deserves the best. Stock up on dog food to keep your puppy happy. Need a quick, tasty lunch at home? Your chicken nuggets will be jumping right out of the freezer. What's a movie night without popcorn? You can never have too much. Lindo's Next Level. Why go anyplace else?
And welcome back. Well, the third thing in the policy, Shadow Minister Smith, improve access to sports facilities. Now, we all know that our sporting facilities need upgrading. There's no secret about that. And when I say facilities, I'm talking about we have decent playing surfaces, or we have decent competitive surfaces, but the facility itself requires attention. Just hearing that part, how do we plan, or looking at it, how do you think they plan to do that? Because if they're increasing the money for participation, is that also increasing money for facility as well, or is that all entwined in it?
So that becomes the real issue, right? So when we were debating it, my question was, where's the money going to come from? Because, we know that because sports has been the left out ministry for so long, the minister is going to have an uphill climb just to have it reach a discussion point. Well, then put on top of it the economic situation that the country's in. We can't be naive that any of this is going to happen from a financial standpoint. It's just where are you going to get the money from? Same way that we would hope that there's more funding that would come from the private sector, but the private sector is also being asked to feed people, right? So there's a lot of pieces in there that it makes it very difficult for you to figure out how we're going to pay for what's going to happen. Just being honest about what those steps look like. So within the document, it actually talks about a multiple sport facility, looking for another multiple sport facility potentially in this document. So I highlighted that we have a multiple sport facility in the National Sports Center. We also have a multiple sport facility in Sands 360 that hasn't worked. And it presently is still sitting in works in engineering's pile and not in youth and sports pile where it belongs. But before we get to the Sands 360 part, because you have to figure out, a lot of times when you're doing your planning phase, you look at how am I going to pay for the actual facility, right? So it's going to cost me this amount of money. But we never look at, well, how do I pay for it 5 years, 10 years down the road? Because it's the maintenance of it, it's the upkeep of it that is the actual continuing cost that you have to know where that revenue is going to come from.
Right.
So one of the things that I brought up to the minister is this: from the National Sports Center perspective, the country and the citizens of the country paid for the facility to be built. That's the starting point. So we're already in. We're right. Like as a country, we're already in. We're invested.
Yeah.
But if our goal is for our athletes to use it and for our athletes to be able to flourish using it, the next step shouldn't have been, well, we've paid for it and now the sports have to pay for the upkeep. That never made sense, right? If you invested the tax, how much does it cost to run the facility, right? Well, make it break even before you do anything else. Whatever the investment is annually for the grant, it has to cover the break even mark. Otherwise, you're already putting sports at a disadvantage. So you have some sports that are taking their entire government grant and paying for the rental of the National Sports Center. Well, how does that make sense? You're taking the money from one government account and putting it in another government account. Well, it's never going to make sense. And there's no way that you can flourish because you've taken the money away from development to pay for rental. That takes a different thought of how sports is going to be. If it's a priority, if you think it's important, then you make that kind of investment. Right? So if you go back to the steps that we were talking about, if you're covering all of those things, which attach to every ministry, now making a facility work, making a facility upgrade, all of a sudden becomes a priority, right? It changes. And that's where we have to go. We have to connect those dots first. And then people will go, yeah, I can get behind that because the result that we're looking for is a healthier population, a more positive population, an educated population. And all of these things are going to come from participation in sport. It also means that it gives us an opportunity for the family to come together. Like all of those positive parts happen, and that is why we're investing in it. What tends to happen now is we wait until whatever facility is, it's falling apart, right? I mean, the national sports, there should be some kind of program where they're doing an upgrade or an upkeep of that facility from one end to the other each year, and then they start again and they do it each time. To go there and see the way that it kind of falls apart when it's supposed to be the jewel of our sporting organization, it should be the highlight of everything, and the opportunity that is available for bringing sports tourism in to use the facilities, to compete in Bermuda, which then, right? So the ministers talked about it, but how are we going to implement it? Because I'll tell you this, every year, multiple sports, multiple teams go away, and they'll go to the East Coast of the US, they'll go to Canada, they'll go wherever. Why are we not setting up a tourism product that says, okay, Earl, we want you to go with such and such a sport. You're going to videotape, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do this promo, same time. You guys are going to take all this tourism information. Every team that you go to, you're going to get, right? So now we become the salespeople. Because guess who the best salespeople are? Bermudians. That's what we are. Yes. And we're connected to the sport to bring that group back to Bermuda. That's a lot cheaper than what we're doing right now. Right, but see how that connection can happen. Instead, what happens a lot of times, sports will come to Bermuda, and the national sport doesn't even know they're coming.
Yeah, which puts them in a very difficult position.
Correct.
As we saw we use the rugby tens. I mean, the rugby federation, Bermuda Rugby Football Union, almost got banned.
Correct.
Because of that.
Because of that.
Yeah. Not really what's going on, and was told if you sanction it, you'd be suspended for X amount of years and a fine of upward of $100,000. So
which was never the intention, right? That's not why you were doing it. But when you look at, I go back to this facility cost problem. When you look at how you're trying to increase participation and you then say, well, how are you going to increase participation when you're creating an obstacle? Like that obstacle is created by us that gets in the way of our people. I can speak from my sport one of the main drivers of having a National Sports Center Aquatic Center was that the sport of swimming was happening on private school fields. That's where the pools are located.
Right.
So when you build the facility, and now it's a government facility, it's the people's facility, you would have thought that that gave the opportunity for the public schools to be involved. But it never happened, and there is no plan to make it happen. Purvis Primary right now, once a year, collects up a bunch of money so they can go there for 1 week out of the year because that's all they can afford. That's a broken system.
Right.
Well, I'm pretty sure that that same kind of story can be told about multiple sports.
Right.
Same time, you have sports through school that are disconnected from youth and sport. Not only do we need to get those two talking to each other, there should be a plan of how we are going to increase that. And that is how you achieve those first two numbers with how you are fixing the third number.
Right. But here's the confusion. So currently, school sports has no connection with youth and sport. It comes under the Ministry of Education.
Yes.
So in one regard, it really looks like, okay, youth and sport is not doing anything for our school students. But the reality is all that comes under the Ministry of Education, which, you know, as we know, they're all about those numbers when it comes to the end of the year. They want to see percentage numbers, and sports for some principals is not even secondary. We're not even going to allow these kids to participate in sports unless it's after school, and that's on their own time. It's not part of, you know what I mean? And that's where I think we have a major problem when it comes to, and you talked about it at the beginning of the show, we have a problem with obesity, we have a problem with all these other things, but we're not having the people who are quote unquote the expert in sport dealing with the sport. Now, if sports in the schools came under the Ministry of came under Youth and Sport, then those teachers that deal just with PE can actually have now a conversation and have more input in what you've kind of set up at Warwick Academy, because I know for a fact what you implemented at Warwick Academy with the swimming academy, you try to do it in the public schools as well.
Correct. So, but you think about what you just said, right? Well, that also, if you had that set up without doing a separate sports academy, if you just made that change you just referred to, it's much harder for somebody to come to Bermuda and say, I want to have your kid come to such and such a school at $60,000, right? Because the problem is, it's getting the administrators to understand the importance of sport. So outside of Bermuda, right, in the US and the UK and Canada, they got it, right? So the prep schools they're going to, it's education, sport.
Yes.
They connect the two pieces together, which is what I'm saying to you is the advantage that we can grab onto quite easily if we figure out how to do it, right? So the conversation that I had with the headmaster of Warwick Academy that led to this Warwick program, which is now moving to other sports, right? They're now looking to do it in football. They're looking to do it in cricket because they understand that these are our customers, right? Well, that's the same way that we need to be thinking about it. Like I said, if somebody's taking up a loan, right, to take their kid and pay $60,000 outside of Bermuda, what would they be willing to do here? Because it wouldn't cost $60,000, and Bermuda's the most expensive place in the world.
Yeah.
Right. So it seems that these are just issues where if we communicated better, right? If we cross-pollinated, right? Where you're instead of us, oh well, that's their department and that's their department. Really? We're a town. Everybody's got to keep remembering that. We're a small town. Anywhere else, that's what it is. So if that's the case, it's a simple phone call, right? Like I've told you before, we should be cross-training.
Right.
Multiple sports on that Saturday morning on the beach with multiple coaches for multiple sports, doing the physical things that our children are not doing anymore when they're little, right? Some of the things that coaches are having to teach them now, people would have learned in their houses before, right? They're not moving anymore.
Right.
So we're just getting them to move. Well, think about it. If you created an environment where everybody felt that it was okay to do. Instead, we're all cannibalizing.
Right.
You see an athlete, you see somebody that's training. Oh, I need to grab them for my sport because if I don't show that highlight, I'm not going to get any funding. We have to move away from that whole concept.
Right.
So,
yeah. We're going to take our final commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to finish off the two final ones of the 5 goals, and that is increase the value of sport and establish a framework of talent development. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the new bulk store, Lindo's Next Level. Wake up in the morning with enough coffee to keep you running throughout the entire day. Your pet at home deserves the best. Stock up on dog food to keep your puppy happy. Need a quick, tasty lunch at home? Your chicken nuggets will be jumping right out of the freezer. What's a movie night without popcorn? You can never have too much. Lindo's Next Level. Why go anyplace else?
I'm also thankful and grateful because my greatest value of my life is my legacy.
But why I do it? I feel supposed to do it. I was put here to be here, to do what I'm doing right now. Once I see somebody moving, it's the greatest joy for me. There's a little person being born.
I am thankful that people have given me the trust, for me to empower them, from my players to my family to friends. And that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that people have allowed me and trusted me to be in their life.
Putting down the weapons.
You seeing this?
And welcome back. Let me just say, because I had a phone call during the break, we are just discussing alternatives to the sports policy and giving suggestions. So for those people who think myself or the shadow minister is undercutting this policy, that's not what we're doing. We're actually offering suggestions to and giving some credence to the sports policy itself. So more information and more suggestions can only benefit this document that is kind of a guideline to start off with, and then hopefully it improves because it's a 5-year plan, but it's not a concrete plan because it can actually improve over the course of the 5 years. So that's I just wanted to let that caller know who was kind of just a bit upset with myself and how this was going. But increasing the value of sport. I honestly believe that sports is valuable to this country. Increasing it, the only way we can increase the value of sport in this country is in the finance part, because you have so many people who are passionate about sports, that are involved in sports, and give you value, as you've already indicated, for volunteerism. They volunteer their time. They give up their time to make a sport that much better. But the only way to better it, and again, where does the funding come from?
Yeah, I mean, that's the difficulty, right? So step one is to put a policy out there that starts the discussion point, which is what we're doing right now.
Yes.
Right. So this policy is the jump off, hopefully to move us in the direction to continue the conversation and then turn that conversation into action.
Yes.
And really, the value of sport, I think that anybody that's involved with sport, anybody that's had a child that's involved in sport, anybody that goes to watch a sport can see that value. What we need to do is shine a brighter light on it, and show that it is a priority. And that conversation that I have had with the minister and will continue to have with the minister is about that part. How do we move the way the minister has put it is to move from what is recreation to professionalism, or from, Bermudians are passionate about sport, but a lot of times we're passionate about sport that happens outside of the country.
Outside of the country. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
We focus on all the details of, and you can go anywhere in the island and find people that will know stats on everything that's happening in the Premier League or name your sport, and they know those details.
Yeah.
One of the things that you have to change, and it's done purposefully, right, is that you have to create that same kind of environment that creates the excitement locally, right? So I guess the example that I'll bring up is that in Australia, when they moved swimming to be the national sport, what they did was, it was on purpose. They made some changes. So they created like a quiz, and this is the fastest person in this event, and it was in taxis, it was on buses, it was right. So now the population started to get involved in it, and now you start to see, well, wait a minute, and you can do that with any of the sports, right? We have great athletes, past and present, that we should be giving that information about. A lot of times people will see, what I'm going to call famous people that are in the country day to day, and they don't realize who they are. They don't realize how important they were to sport.
Mm-hmm.
In order to change that, it has to be purposeful. Like, you have to every day decide that that's what we're going to do. We're going to make sport a priority. And that's how we'll make this change happen. So the sports policy is that first step in that direction. But as I said to the minister, I will help every way I can to help him to make this achievable.
Mm. And then the final one is establish a framework for talent development. One of the things that we know at the younger age, we have a lot of talent. We see, and you've already indicated as well, we see a lot of people coming in, snatching our talent, claiming that they're going to develop them when we've already developed them in the country, but we allow them to go. So, I mean, this point here, what would be your message to the minister and for the public in general of establishing a framework for talent development? I mean, we've got to have some sort of input on this, and I know the people at Youth in Sport helped put this document together, and would have talked to quite a few organizations, which it's all good, but that talent development, how would you frame that up?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about talent identification. So talent identification is just the first step, right? So you identify that there are talents, right? So to take that thought a little further, it is going to be, they're going to look at the details. What does your family line look like? Are the people in your family tall? Are the people in your family short? Are the people in your family strong? Like, that's literally what's done outside of the country. So it's not by accident that they make the decisions to say, yes, you could spend the next 12 years becoming a basketball player, but you're going to be 5'5". Mm. Now, is it possible for you to be a basketball player? Yes. Is it probable? No. Now, not about shutting somebody's dream down, but understand there's a difference between the recreational path, which is, I love basketball. Okay, fine. But we don't have 20 million people. The US, 300 million people. To that, the reason why they end up with the gold medalists is because they're starting with that big number. Mm-hmm. And even with that big number, They're doing all of these things to identify the talent and then take that talent and nurture it. And that number that they're nurturing is bigger than our entire population, right? So that's the steps that you're looking at. Maybe we can't go there yet, but step one will be putting in a program to identify the talent and then figure out what are we going to have to do to take that group from where we are now, which is a really good regional participation. We do really well regionally in multiple sports. We are punching above our weight because we do have really good coaches. We do have people that are officiating. We do have volunteers. We do have infrastructure. All those pieces are in place. But the next step is not as simple as that. So it's identifying and then figuring out what that pathway is going to be. Because long-term athlete development is fine unless you get to that point where, okay, well, what is it that we're going to have to do here to make the jump start? Because every sport will tell you, I'm going to lose the athlete around 13. I'm going to lose the athlete around 15, right? And in Bermuda, you're going to get that block that happens at 16 when they get their bike, right? So they're going to make a choice because now they get to decide whether they're going to go to the practice, they're not going to go to the practice, they're going to go hang out with their friend, whatever that is. So we need to look at those steps and figure out what are we going to do in order to make sure that that path for our athletes is supported in a way that they make the correct decision.
Well, my final question to you then would be this. How do you also convince your colleagues that this is vital? As we know, there's going to be an election in the next 2 or 3 years, and you know, anything's possible that you could become the next government. But how do you convince your colleagues that sports is central to this country?
Well, I just have to keep repeating it. I have to keep saying what I've said tonight. I mean, the issue is this, and this is the reason why I wanted to be supportive of the minister putting this forward, and I'm willing to meet with him and help out in any way I can, because sport has never been a priority, right? You go back in history, it's never been a priority. We've done a really good job of patting people on the back when they've achieved, but in most cases, they've achieved in spite of, right? Most people in Bermuda that have reached the highest levels, and you can go through history, how many times we've achieved world-class performances, and the truth is the country was mostly in their way on that journey. So everything I said to you about what those connections are is a message that I will continue to give. If we can connect the dots between all the things that can be helped in our country based off of sport, I think that is the message. Because, you know, politicians are going to want to know, where's the win? Where's the thing that makes me look good? Well, if you can increase the health of your population, if you can decrease the cost of healthcare, if you can increase the amount of positive people that are being brought into the community, if you can lower the amount of people that are involved with crime, and if you can educate our young people and have overseas universities pay for it because of the prowess of sport, all of those things are wins, and every politician will follow that line.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time. You know, we look forward to you meeting with the minister and you working side by side. I think it's time to unify everything for the betterment of sport itself and for the country, because sport is as you've said and as I've said, it is vitally important to this country. It touches every single household, whether or not somebody in your house is directly involved in sport, but somebody, your neighbor, you know, your cousin, somebody's involved in a sport. And I think that's the one thing that we have to really, really focus in on, is that it touches each and everyone's household, and it can make a difference if we, you know, really, really rally behind it. And I know there's other challenges in this country. We know we have healthcare problems. We know we have all sorts of problems. But one way, and we saw it when Flora came home after winning the gold medal, the country stopped to celebrate, and that was a sport. So
100%.
Yeah, with that, I say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you, and you too.
Okay.